I'd hope that the legacy that we leave is that the confidence of knowledge and ability supersedes everything else, and the desire to perform at the highest level and to do projects that not only look beautiful but work perfectly. So if that's what I leave behind, if that's my legacy, I'm thrilled with that.
Welcome to your go-to podcast for the pool and spa industry. My name is Tyler Rasmussen.
And my name is Greg Villafania. And this is the Pool Chasers Podcast.
Hey, Pool Chasers. Thank you for joining us today in episode 49 of the Pool Chasers Podcast. Our mission is to help educate and inspire in the form of a podcast.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Brian.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Can you please introduce yourself to listeners and what you do exactly?
Sure. I'm Brian Van Bauer, and I'm involved with currently with 3 companies. I'm CEO of Aquatic Consultants Inc, based originally in Miami, with now a sub office in the Tampa St. Pete area, which is where I live. I'm an ambassador for Genesis, the educational company that was started 22 years ago by Skip Phillips and David Tisherman and myself. And then I also have a small consulting company that's me personally called BVB Consulting LLC. I do work with some people in the industry and some homeowners for small projects where they just need expertise as it relates to pools and water features.
Oh, very good. Thank you for sharing that. We like to kind of get to know you a little bit better as a person. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. I'm an enjoyer of the good life, which was the name of a radio show that I did for many years, starting in Miami, Florida. I did it starting with my brother, the Bauer brothers, sharing their enjoyment of food, wine, and the good life. And got to meet some of the highest profile food and wine people in the industry. I was on the national board of the American Institute of Wine and Food, and served with Julia Child and Robert Mondavi and Margaret Duckhorn, and we sat together and ate together. I developed quite a appreciation for the good life, including wine. So I have a wine cellar in my home. I'm married to my wife, Gina. We've been married for 28 years, and I have a daughter who lives in California in Venice and who's here visiting at the moment. I live in North Reddington Beach, Florida. My wife and I enjoy traveling. I play a little golf. I design swimming pools and water features on the weekends. Just kidding. And I'm pretty much enjoying life at this point. My office is run by the president of my company, Andy Kainer. The Aquatic Consultants he's the guy that keeps things going day to day. And I work with him on projects and do some stuff remotely. And then a lot of days I have to decide where I want to go fishing or whether I want to float in the pool.
Nice. Can we go back a little bit? Maybe you kind of tell us where you kind of grew up and a little bit more about childhood.
Sure. Like that. Yeah. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and lived there my entire life until 2 years ago when I moved here. Started in the pool industry working in a motel in Sunny Isles called the Suez Motel, rubbing suntan oil for a living 7 days a week, wearing a nylon bathing suit, which I looked better in back then than I would today. And I worked 7 days a week in the sun and took care of 2 pools. And when I did that, I ended up with the care of a gas chlorine treated pool, which I had no training in and probably could have wiped out half of the French Canadian population at the time with just one slip of the valve. And I took care of those pools and eventually ended up being the pool manager there. After that, I ended up getting married to my first wife, Jaws 1. We ended up, yeah, well, I'm on Jaws 3 now, the final episode. And so I went into pool service for a company called Dysart Pools and began my pool service business. I worked for Dysart for several years, cleaning pools. And then at one point I decided that I would start my own pool service company, which is how a lot of people in the pool industry get into the field. They just all of a sudden wake up one day smelling like chlorine with a telescopic pole in their car. And next thing you know, they're a pool man. So I started my pool service company with one account and built it up to over 500 accounts, and then opened 2 retail stores and started doing renovations, and then started doing spas when it was when people tried to call them saunas. People would go to the home show and see a spa and call it a sauna. Did some of the first portable spas before that was a thing. We actually built them and put them on wheels. We thought if you were going to have a portable spa, you should be able to wheel it where you wanted it to go, which was incorrect, but that's what we did. And we did spas for a while, and then I started building pools around 1980. Started building pools. My first pool was a pool spa combo with a rock waterfall and electronic controls on pilings. And we decided that we would price our projects based on what things actually cost rather than being concerned with what our competition might be charging for similar projects. We built swimming pools on Miami Beach. That's where my office was. Did major renovations and continued to do pool construction, and ended up with 20 employees and the 2 different retail locations and so forth. And then one day I had an epiphany. I was on a riverboat cruise, a pool industry riverboat cruise for a company called Horner Express. Currently, at the time, it was Horner Equipment. And a bunch of pool people drinking. Surprise at that. And we were riding up on the top deck of this boat on the river in Fort Lauderdale. And I saw these beautiful, expensive homes along the water, multi-million-dollar homes, which at the time was a lot of money. And they all had pools.
It still is.
It is, but it's different a little bit today. And they had pools, and the pools were relatively ordinary, mostly 2 choices, a rectangle or a kidney. And I looked at that and I thought that's pretty limiting for people that have the wherewithal, which is a nice way of saying money, to have a home like this on the water in Fort Lauderdale. And yet they ended up with a pretty ordinary pool. The house is phenomenal, great architecture. The landscaping was phenomenal, beautiful landscaping and design. And there was the pool. And, and then ending up with a kidney pool. I'm not a big fan of body part pools. And if I was, it wouldn't be a kidney. I'll leave it to your imagination what it might be. But if I'm going to dive into something, it ain't going to be a kidney. So we ended up, I realized what the problem was at that moment. And the problem was us, our industry. That's all our industry offered to those people who had the wherewithal to have whatever they wanted. And at that moment, I decided that I wanted to learn more about pool design, not just building them and building the same thing over and over again, replicating the same mistakes continually for different people. So I ended up having this desire, and I was active with the Pool Association. I was president of the Florida Pool and Spa Association, which is currently known as FSPA, and was active on a state level. And then I got on the national board of what at the time was NSPI, National Swimming Pool Institute, and served on the national board along with Skip Phillips. That's where I met Skip. And then I got on committees on a national level and I was on the Design Award Committee. And that was the genesis of Genesis, if you will. We were at a meeting in the Bahamas, because I got to choose the location for the meeting. So I figured, what the hell, let's go to another country. And we had this meeting in the Bahamas, and there were several people on my committee, and it was to review the standards for design awards. And during that meeting with Skip Phillips, I chose him to be on the committee. I also added David Tisherman to the committee because David was a stickler for chastising everybody's work and, trying to offer more design level things. So I put them on the committee. I figured, you got a big mouth, why don't you get on the committee? Because he gave me some grief one day at a trade show. He said, "Oh, you're in charge of that design award committee." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Nice job." And he was like being facetious. So I said, "Well, why don't you get on the committee and you can fix it?" So that's how we got him on there. And we were sitting at the meeting in the Bahamas, and one of the guys, and I have to put this in perspective because it's our industry, and I'm not naming names other than the 2 I just gave you. We had some final liner pool people on the committee, and they were advocating that we give additional awards to vinyl liner pool manufacturers for the painted design on the outside of an above ground pool. And we were appalled by that thought. And we thought, first of all, if you're going to give an award for a design on the outside of an above ground vinyl liner pool, you ought to give it to the manufacturer, not to the pool guy who bought it. And they were also giving awards to above ground spas. And we said, well, that's fine if you want to do that, but we think we ought to change the name to I Bought It and Got It Damn Near Level Award for the above ground spa, because that was pretty much the whole deal. You know, I put steps in front of it, you know, I put a towel rack beside it and a couple of flowers and took a picture of it, and I'd like to get an award for it. So anyway, the meeting kind of devolved because Tisherman told one of the guys that his stuff sucked. And so then we had a break, and Skip and David and I were sitting outside, and we decided to form a company among the three of us to market ourselves collectively as people that were trying to achieve a higher level of performance. And so we came up with Genesis, and that was the start of Genesis. And then shortly after that, Skip went to an NSPI education meeting and advocated that they come up with some additional education at a higher level, said that we were doing programs ourselves, but that there wasn't much there that excited us. And so he advocated that we have architects and landscape architects and people on color theory and things like that. And that was quickly poo-pooed by the board, and they said there's no demand for that. So then Skip, without our prior knowledge, said, well, if you don't do it, then Genesis will do it, which was news to us. And then, so shortly after that, we planned our first school, flew out to California. In fact, Skip, in his typical style, chartered a plane. And we flew to the location with several industry icons, including Vance Gillette, went to look for a site for our first school and planned the first Genesis class after that. So it was quite exciting at the time, but at least then we had a venue for us to get the education that we desired, to get a higher level of education, to learn things that we weren't getting the same stuff regurgitated over and over again. And honestly, the majority of the education prior to that was education provided by manufacturers. So if you were going to have a program on pool lights, it was given by somebody who made a particular pool light. And guess what light they talked about in the program? So they didn't, even though their education and their knowledge was valuable as it pertained to their product, they weren't there to tell you about all the lights in the world, including lights that they didn't manufacture. And that has been historically the norm in our industry. And so Genesis set out to just find the best possible level of education available, whether it was within the industry or not, to teach the programs. We experimented with different classes over the years, and sometimes people didn't necessarily appreciate some of the topics that we brought forward. One of my favorite examples was one of our level 2 schools that we did in Florida Keys. Our friend Paolo Benedetti was there. And he was going through the program, as were a lot of other people, and we had varying topics for different periods of time over a 3-day period of time in Alamorada and the Florida Keys. Anyway, the point of it is we had a feng shui master. And so the feng shui master started telling people about the elements that you need to have in the environment in order to create good karma and so forth. And Benedetti came over to me at the break, and he said, you know, I've always participated in the stuff that you guys provided and thought you were headed in a good direction, but I got to tell you that this feng shui stuff is a crock. And I said, well, I think it's real, and I think that you have clients that are into feng shui. So to jump ahead, 6 months later or so, I got a letter from Benedetti that says, oh, great master, I come to you on bended knees. He said, because I was in a meeting today with clients, and the few little tidbits of feng shui education I picked up came up, and they thought I was a genius, and I was the only pool guy to have any knowledge about feng shui, and I got the project, so I'm indebted eternally. And
that's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty neat. And you know, the ride that we had in Genesis, 20 years under the leadership of 3 pool guys, or two pool guys in the latter years, was we saw a potential for growth, wanted to leave a legacy of keeping this education growing and moving forward. So back 3 years ago, we had a meeting in the Keys with Tom Lachaki and Bill Kent from Horner Express. Lachaki came to me and wanted to know how the National Swimming Pool Foundation might work more with Genesis. He actually showed up at a vacation spot where you drink beer in the morning with a PowerPoint presentation and started showing me the PowerPoint about how we might work better together. And so I said to him, I said, well, why don't we merge the organizations and you can grow Genesis, which took him off guard. And that's how we ended up with the merger with the foundation. We ended up going for strength. They had a fixed location. They have people in marketing. They've got a lot of people active in different levels all throughout their organization. And they were dedicated to education. And most people in the pool industry didn't have a clue of who they were, which is a little weird. And so they did a good thing for Genesis. They put a little more substance and made things a little more organized and still gave us the ability to do what we do best, which is talk to our people and come up with ideas for programs, as well as have the relationships with our various sponsors, which have been great. We have great sponsors that continually support our educational mission. So I think that it leaves us in a good place. Skip and I are both retained as ambassadors for Genesis, and we still go to the programs and teach and still take the education at the same time. We have ongoing education requirements that we all have to participate in. So in addition to that, going back on my personal career, I ended up with the idea of traveling for Genesis and for continuing to work for Aquatic Consultants. And then I had some requests from within the industry to share my knowledge, because my theory has always been that over my long pool career, I've made almost every mistake you can make. And so if you want to save yourself some time, you could just let me tell you about the mistakes I've made and tell you what things work, or you could spend the next 20 or 30 years making the same mistakes. So it made sense to me to be able to offer whatever knowledge I've picked up along the way to people who might want to jump ahead. And so I continue to try to do that. And at the same time, I'm also not naive enough to not appreciate the fact that there's always something new for me to learn. And every time I go to a program or an educational entity where I'm supposed to be the teacher, I usually come away with some additional knowledge of my own. And I constantly like to take in new knowledge and learn new things. And sometimes all I learn is that I shouldn't have gone to that program. But most of the time, it's because it's something valuable that I can use in my personal and business life.
Oh, buddy, we got a special announcement here.
Yes, we do.
So our friends at Jandy are crushing it with their push to quit the internet.
Crushing it.
We recently made a special trip to San Diego to see their new facility, which is amazing. But most importantly, to get an update on their progress with catching online violators. We had the opportunity of sitting in on their enforcement meeting, and let me tell you, this was taken a lot more seriously than we thought it would. They showed us a chart of violations and, their progress from January till now. They're at 82% attainment of compliance, meaning from day one when they started policing and enforcing to today, they have reduced the number of Jandy violations online by 82%.
It's simple. The customer wants to go online and save a few dollars by purchasing their equipment online. This is something that we've all gone through as service professionals, and Jandy's heard the cry. They've taken a stand and they've supported our industry. They understand that only a qualified pool professional should work around electrical, gas, and hydraulic connections. I mean, have you even seen a customer work with that kind of stuff?
I have, and it's not pretty.
Definitely not pretty. Jandy's warranty will not cover any Jandy equipment that is not purchased, installed, and or serviced by a pool professional. This will save you guys time and money by allowing you to avoid those awkward conversations with your customer and let you focus on the part of the business that you do best. If you want to find out more details, listen to episode 31 of the podcast or go to jandy.com/builtstrong. That's jandy.com/builtstrong.
Yeah. So one thing I really found interesting you said was that you guys kind of, started Genesis with the intent of learning as well alongside people who are attending classes. I think we've always kind of assumed that you guys had that knowledge and you were teaching it. But it sounds like you guys really were trying to educate yourselves alongside others that had that same like-minded vision.
That's absolutely correct. We had certain things that we wanted to learn that we brought forward. So that's how we developed the curriculum. We were just naming stuff we wanted to learn about. And admittedly, some of the stuff would be something that other people gave us that said, this is, what we think you ought to learn. And we'd look at it and go, I don't know. The first time I took color theory, I'm not sure that I appreciated the fact that it would be extremely relevant. And then someone pointed out that the typical pool of the day was had bullnose red brick and blue butterfly tile on the pool and looked like crap. And then I went, oh yeah, maybe color theory would be a good thing. Maybe we should learn a little bit about what colors go together and what don't. Some of the stuff was directed by each of us individually, and some of it was kind of forced down our throat by one of the other guys, and say, I think we ought to learn this. And it was out of that desire that we had to get smarter. We did teach courses, and that was the point. What was there for Skip or for me or for Tisherman for that matter in a program? And the answer was not much other than to teach. So that was the initial impetus to start Genesis.
Very cool. We heard an interview with you from Jason, with River Pools from a few years ago, and he talked about how he took some Genesis classes. He kind of felt, like he had permission to be different and to challenge the status quo. We 100% agree with him when, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy by thinking we need to do, what everybody else is doing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that most people that attend Genesis classes go one of two directions. They either go and they realize that this is an opportunity to differentiate themselves from the rest of the industry, and they kind of catch fire. I'll never forget at that first school in Morro Bay, we ended up with 30 students, and during the course of the classes, we'd had people that were calling their office and telling them, hold up, we're going to change everything. They'd be on their way to a wine dinner, and they'd be on the bus on their phone telling their office, I found my tribe. That's one of the common exit quotes that we get from people. I have to say that we were somewhat surprised because when we did the first school, we thought we were just going to do one school one time. And we thought we'd be lucky to get 20 or 30 people from across the entire country that were interested enough in getting smarter to come to our class. And we got the 30. And at that class, lo and behold, at the end of the class, the three of us were sitting in the lobby at the inn at Morro Bay, and the students were coming in to tell us how much they loved the program and how it was great for them. And then they asked a question that we hadn't really been prepared for, and that was, when's the next one? And so we looked at each other, and we had kind of had that look like, in school where they ask you a question and you tilt your head and you go, oh? So we ended up with the second class and then went from there. All the people that went to those classes ended up becoming devoted Genesis guys and wanted to better themselves, and it did give them permission to act differently. And then also the monetary part. And first I would have to tell you that my belief about earning income is that money is the shavings from a good carpenter's tools. It shouldn't be the driving force. You shouldn't take a job because of the money. You should take a job because you love it, and then the money will flow after that. But on the other hand, the industry has not always priced itself well, and often priced itself based on what other people were charging, even though those people might be dumber than cheese. And we were in an industry where most of the people, at least for a long period of time, most of the people who got in the pool industry got in there by mistake. They went to work for somebody else while they were waiting for a good job and smelled the chlorine, and next thing you know, they're a pool person. But they didn't make a long-term plan. They didn't go to business school and come out saying, I'm going to be a pool man or a pool woman. Today, I think that there's starting to see a trend of people actually realizing that it's a valid and good industry. And obviously, we're in a pleasure business. I always tell people that a couple never gets up on a Saturday and gets excited about getting in their car to go get a new muffler. But if they're going to get a new pool, they're fired up. They're thinking about laying out on a lounge chair and having friends over and barbecuing and swimming and being healthier and so forth. And so we're in a pleasure industry, and we create beauty and we create vessels that are attractive, that make people want to go outside, to make them bring their families together. We cool people in the summertime when it's hot out, and we warm them in the wintertime in their spa. We're in the business of selling pleasure, so that makes it more interesting for people to be involved in the pool industry. And it's a great industry for me. It's been valid, but the point is that some of the people that came to our early programs were talking to some of the people that were getting much more money for the same products that they were providing. And it was an awakening, because when I first started, I priced my projects at the time when I was building pools. I priced my project based on cost and adding on what I thought I needed to make as a legitimate profit, with no regard for what other people were charging for the same vessel. And it's not that I said I want to blow everybody out of the water by my absurd pricing or anything. I just wanted to make it right for the risk that I was taking. I wanted to get compensated on a fair level. So I would take my total cost, and I had a partner when I was doing spas that was a construction estimator by trade, and he taught me to do a takeoff on every project before and after. So before you bid the project, do a complete takeoff, list every item, tally it all up, come up with a cost of goods, and then add your labor, add your overhead, and then add what you think is a reasonable and fair profit. And that's the way I priced my stuff initially. And so when I did that, I came up with prices different than other people. And I didn't care. Fortunately, my work spoke for itself, and I wanted to perform at a high level. My industry wasn't. There were a lot of volume pool builders at the time that were stamping out pools. And, the industry was in a big growth mode, because originally pools were for the wealthy and elite. And then all of a sudden it became something that most people thought about having. And I still think that we're in the growth mode. I still think that more and more people are realizing that they want to have a pool or a water vessel of some kind. I think that there's tremendous potential for growth in our industry still today. And part of the growth that I think the industry needs to aspire to is in the education regarding swimming. As a group of people that make swimming pools, we have had very little to do with swimming. And one of the things that enticed us with the foundation is their effort to not only educate, but to support swimming on a broad scale plan. So they have a program called Step Into Swim, and they fund swimming programs all over through various agencies. And I think it's a great thing. I think our industry needs to be involved in that on a high level, because initially it's a great thing to prevent drowning and make people healthier and so forth. And let's face it, if you look at, if you go sit in a park or something, which maybe that's not the right place to go, probably more like a gaming salon or something. But if you look at today's kids, they're mostly overweight, unhealthy, they have very little physical activity. So I think that we owe it to mankind to help them become healthier, and swimming is a great way to do it. But on top of that, in the long term, creating swimmers down the road is going to create people that would probably want our products.
So I've always had this question for pool builders, designers, is that how come, because that is an issue with kids drowning and different things like that. How come it hasn't been a standard, almost since day one, where there's just some type of cover or some type of something that's just keeping kids out of the pool? We always hear that it's compromising the look of the vessel.
The aesthetic, yeah.
I think if you're a visionary, an artist and designer and builder, that you should be able to figure out a way to implement that safety feature, and it doesn't take away. Do you have any ideas about that?
I do.
Has there been any pools that you've created that were safe yet, I guess, aesthetically pleasing?
Yes, I see both sides of that issue, because one of the things we have to be cognizant of is that sometimes regulations exceed the need, but in this case, not generally. Our industry didn't like some of the regulations proposed for safety, and obviously they weren't uniform. So you'd have one part of the country that every pool had to have an automatic cover, and you'd have another part of the country that they didn't have to have fences. So there wasn't a uniform standard. Some of the associations tried to come up with something that made it more uniform. one of the biggest problems with all of the safety elements is that they can be turned off, opened up. Occasionally, they'd create a false sense of security. So now, the parents wouldn't pay attention to the children because they thought, well, we've got that fence around the pool, or was that some other safety device? And that's one of the reasons that I would advocate teaching people to swim, because then it doesn't, if they fall in, they're still good. And, I do it even with my dog. My dog doesn't like the water, but I take the dog in the pool on a regular basis just so the dog knows where to get out of the pool. The dog knows how to swim. It's inbred in them, but doesn't necessarily understand how to get out. In the beginning, he would try to climb up on the coping and get out, and I keep pointing him to the steps. So I think that there's a balance there. And as a builder, yes, sometimes the safety mechanisms can be counterintuitive to design. So now all of a sudden you create this beautiful elevated perimeter overflow vessel, and then you put a fence all the way around it. Now you can't see it very well. So that's why I say I see both sides of the issue. And then the other time, there's times when the regulations don't seem proper. I did a project near Miami many years ago for a client, designed it and built it. He had lived in the home for 20 some years on the waterway in Coral Gables with dark, murky water that if a child fell in, you might not even know it. And then he built a vessel in his yard with clear blue water that you could see every little gnat in the bottom of the pool. And now he had to have a fence.
Right.
He didn't understand that because he said, I lived on the water all those years. I never had to have a fence. And the stark reality of that is that there's some part of it that's based on litigation. Because if a child falls in the canal and drowns, you can't sue God. And yet if they fall in the pool, then there's usually a lawsuit and all types of issues, and everybody involved is ensnared in a legal battle. He put the fence up because it's required, and that's what he did. And we even had some where the authorities wanted to put a fence on the seawall. So if you bought a property that was on the water and obviously paid more money for waterfront property, and then all of a sudden I told you had to block your view with a fence to prevent a child from swimming up and climbing the seawall and drowning in the pool, you would probably be upset over that concept. Granted, you could put the fence back by the pool and still meet the code. So I think there's a balance there, but that's one of the reasons why my first reaction is let's teach swimming. Let's teach it at an early age. Let's teach children how to be safe around the water. Certainly, we want to have safety elements in place. If you're an older couple with no children and you live in a house, do I want to hear a door alarm at midnight when I let Muffy out in the yard, even though I have no children? And the answer to that's no. It's my yard, it's my house. I don't want to do that. But if I'm a young family, I probably would want to have some type of notice that the kids are opening the door to the backyard to go out to the pool.
Yeah.
So that's the balance, and I think we have to be cognizant of the value of safety elements, and yet at the same time, I think that we, as an industry, everybody should be involved in swimming. One of the things that we're working on now, and are starting to gain some traction, especially through some of our Genesis guys, is that we have a network. Whether you're a pool service company, a pool construction or design firm, you have a network, a database of people that like pools. So why not solicit them to contribute funds to step in to swim? So every pool service company puts a flyer in that says, we want to make sure that everybody stays safe around pools, and we'd like to enlist your help to further this cause. Would you donate to Step Into Swim, which, by the way, the foundation completely funds to the point of putting out more money than what they take in. There's no operating costs, no overhead, if you will. All of that's covered. So if we get $100,000 in, they usually spend more than $100,000 in benefits to swimming programs. So that's in today's world, that's the first thing you look for with a charity or anything you're going to donate to, is how much of the money actually goes to the cause compared to overhead. And in this case, all of it and more. I think it's something we should all get into, and I'm hoping that we can do that. I hope we get the industry behind it. So far, we've got a couple of people that have caught fire. A couple of our Genesis students have been involved in local things and ended up going there. And think about this, if you try to tie it back to increasing your business, which would not be the initial reason why you did it, it always helps to have a little extra reward. So one of the people that in North Carolina, she got involved with a local swimming program, got the Step Into Swim to contribute money, and then she went there and presented the check and was in the local paper as a pool industry designer and person who had the opportunity to give money to a swimming campaign, which got her good publicity and probably drew some leads for her on top of feeling good about what she was doing. So I think that's worthwhile.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Do they offer CPR as well? Do they do any CPR training?
They don't. And by the way, I'm at the stage of life where I have a bad habit of saying what I'm thinking and not worrying about the consequences, which, it's okay. It works for me. But that's why I don't get building permits anymore, because I can't go there. I can't deal with incompetence, and my veins get large just thinking about going to the building department.
Sure.
But I went in Miami. I was before the city commission in Miami, and one of the people on the board, this was all related to drowning prevention, and they were talking about fences and about fencing in swimming pools in particular. And I'm in favor of fencing in swimming pools where it's appropriate, but they were just talking about drowning and fencing. So I said, yes, you know what? I think that and they wanted CPR. That's why I brought it up. They wanted to advocate by law that in your yard, you had to have someone there had a CPR certificate at all times while the kids were in the pool. Now, I realize that may sound good to somebody, but that's almost impossible to enforce. Who's going to turn you in? The kids? That was they wanted fences around every water vessel, and they wanted someone with CPR. I turned it around on them in front of the commission. I said, well, I agree with you. I think that fencing would keep people out of the water and keep them safe. So since we're in Florida, I advocate putting a fence all the way around the state to keep everyone out of the ocean, because more people drown in the ocean than they do in the pool. And I think that if they don't have a CPR card, they can't get through the gate. The whole room got quiet. And of course, they realized that it was ridiculous, and they didn't vote for it. So that's the balance. That's what I'm saying about the balance. I mean, do you think it's right everybody should have CPR someone with CPR in their backyard every time the kids go in the pool? I don't think so.
I guess it depends. I would say yes, because my little brother drowned, and if somebody there were CPR certified, he probably could have saved him. Should have known how to swim, but grew up in a poor neighborhood where learning how to swim is not top priority. But if one of our family members, was CPR certified, maybe somebody could have brought him back a little bit sooner than the ambulance getting there. But I think it's more just everybody just needs to be aware. I'm just a firm believer in, if you're going to set standards, it's either yes or no. Just like on cars, you don't see some cars with seatbelts and some without, because that's where it's difficult, And I think even drownings, we were talking about, you might be older and you don't need a pool fence. Most drownings actually don't happen at, the homeowners. It's, the grandparents or the aunts and uncles that don't have kids, but they host the 4th of July party.
Right.
And, they have, relatives and nieces and nephews over that, don't have a pool, and they're not as, experienced in the pool. I think it's a really tricky situation, because some people really don't ever have any kids in their pool. But I just recently had pool equipment put in at my house. The guys that actually installed the equipment left 1, 2, 3 of my gates open leading to the pool.
Ooh.
And there's quite a few kids in the neighborhood. I mean, hey, I remember being a kid. I was very curious. You're just in it, and my pool's really snug up against a house, so it wouldn't take much to fall in. And it's a scary thought that you could have 3 fences to a pool, and pool professionals are leaving every single one of those fences open.
That's major.
Asking for problems, and we're all gone, back to work, wife's at work, kids are at school, and, you're just asking for problems.
I agree. By the way, I didn't advocate the exclusion for fences for old people. I said the door alarm. inside the house. Yes. Yeah, not fencing. I still think they need the fence. But if you're old and you're letting the dog out, I don't want to hear an alarm at midnight. That was my
every
point.
2 seconds. Yeah, no, totally understand that.
Yeah. And I think that everybody, would benefit from having CPR. I guess my point on that is that if that's a requirement, does that mean that if there's nobody there that has CPR training, you can't go in the pool and then you can't learn how to swim? And that's part of the balance. That was my point.
I totally understand what you're saying too about you shouldn't get CPR certified and a fence around your pool because that means you don't have to pay attention to anybody anymore.
Right.
Because I know there's a lot of people like that where it's like, oh, yeah, okay, well, there's a fence now, so I don't really have to pay attention. Like you could just go in the backyard and I'm going to go to the grocery store or I'm going to go take a nap and you're not paying attention to that. That's not
right
how it works. It's just you're reducing your chances of somebody getting hurt or drowning in the pool.
Sure.
It's just, we see a lot of really beautiful pools and the designers that design these pools, their vision is really cool. I think that there should be a different element in the future where maybe engineers get involved in putting up some type of safety device around a pool. I mean, a long time ago, you didn't see fences around houses, and then it just became this like suburban dream where you wanted the house with the tire swing and the picket white fence around. Mm-hmm. And that picket white fence was a staple for that suburban house, but it didn't compromise the overall look and aesthetic.
No, it enhanced it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it enhanced the look. I mean, that was kind of like the iconic look.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Tyler, you know what I saw today?
What'd you see today, Greg?
A husband and wife inside MPT looking to pick out some new tile for their new pool. And you know who was there to help them?
Who?
An MPT expert. And the process seemed to be going pretty smooth.
Well, yeah, I mean, MPT Design Center is the place to go for pool tile, pool finish, hardscapes, and outdoor kitchens. I mean, whether you're building a pool, remodeling it, or just dreaming about it, you can check out their website at mptpool.com to locate an MPT Design Center or showroom near you.
And for all you pool professionals, builders, designers, send your customers to MPT for professional design assistance and product samples they can take home. On the mptpool.com website, you'll also find a wealth of photographs to show what MPT products will look like when they're installed. Plus, you can download a copy of the MPT tile and pool finish catalogs or order a printed copy to be mailed to your home.
So download the MPT mobile app to select products, save favorites, and email them directly to your pool builder. And be sure to follow MPT Pool Products on Instagram and Facebook for the latest photos and product information.
So we can go back a little bit. Actually, we're going to go forward a little bit.
Okay.
What are some of your favorite Genesis classes? And can you explain what they are and, maybe just some of the benefits of taking those classes?
Sure. Hydraulics is one of my favorite topics. And we have 2 different levels of very detailed hydraulics programs. We teach hydraulics in a lot of different programs. Our water in transit or beauty of the edge programs have hydraulics as it relates to those elements. But in general, if you're going to be in the business of moving water from one place to another, you should know how to do it correctly.
Sure.
And as an industry, we've been pretty bad at that. Even longtime people in the industry that have been doing it wrong the whole time. And they have that disease that we refer to as Diddy did it. I've been doing it 25 years, just like my Diddy did it. And I have to tell them, well, your Diddy was wrong.
It's so true.
You can't put a 2-inch pipe on a 3-horsepower pump. And so I think that hydraulics is a big thing. And of course, the programs that we have now, that they're in depth and you end up understanding that you can take everything the pool industry does and do the opposite. As Skip used to like to say, we'd use big pipes and small pumps and big filters and move water with energy efficiency. And that's another, big topic for that. One of my favorite topics is energy efficiency because, a pool can be a energy hog if you don't design it correctly. And that comes back to hydraulics as part of it. But, putting larger pipes is not that big a deal cost-wise. And then all of a sudden, and the correct size pipes, and now you have water moving without making noise at using a variable speed pump at a lower speed, getting the same water you would have got if you tried to force too much water through a small pipe that was too small and would make a noise and burning extra energy. And you're moving the same amount of water for less money, and you're doing it in a nicer way with less disruption. So I think that that's an important topic, and I think that there's always room for growth there. And
I think that's a good one for pool service individuals too, especially ones that are getting into repairs, because it's funny how we talk more about hydraulics and start to understand, what plumbing to actually use when you're actually installing a new pump and filter and things like that. Because, you're pretty limited. If you're just doing a repair, you're not doing any underground plumbing. So you don't have the schematics of the whole entire overall plumbing. But, if you're going to be using sweeps or different things like that, then you have a very good understanding of the way the water is going to move with new equipment. It's just going to make that stuff, work much better. And you're the one that's going to be, taking care of that pool. So you want it to run as efficient and quiet and all those things as possible.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is that even people who want to do better are often misguided. They just haven't had the education. So like one of the areas that points that out is a lot of people that I meet that are trying to do better hydraulics, on their projects, believe that if they do 245-degree elbows, that it's better than a single 90 because it makes a gentle, bend in the pipe. And the truth is that that's incorrect. A single 90 has less resistance than 245s. And now if you had a sweep fitting, if you use like an electrical 90-degree sweep elbow, that's a different animal altogether. One of the guys that did work on my pool here at the house, who wanted to be more knowledgeable, he thought that 245s would definitely be better than 290s, and I had to show him on the chart what the resistance is, and he did. He looked at it and he went, "Oh, gee, and I've been doing it wrong the whole time."
That's not how my daddy did it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And let's go back. Where did most people in the pool industry get their knowledge? The answer is probably from someone else in the pool industry.
Yeah. Like usually it's working at another company and
that's
just
right.
Being a journeyman for another mechanic or something like that.
And so then the truth of that is that when you're working for someone and they're writing your check, you assume they know what they're doing, but that isn't always the case. And then a lot of people work for someone who didn't know what they were doing and shouldn't be in business and probably owes their suppliers. And they taught them wrong stuff. And then they go out and degrade it a tad and start their own company. And so there was no formal education is my point. And no credible education. And the industry in their desire to elevate their ranks in the public's eye started self-congratulating and grandfathering. So people that were making decisions about education said to themselves, well, obviously, if we're coming up with this educational program, we should grandfather ourselves in because we already know this stuff. And so then they'd grandfather themselves in, and now they'd have some kind of a, certificate or something that said, I'm wonderful because I said so. And it wasn't credible. And so now along comes Genesis, and guess what? Think about this. Someone comes to one of our classes and spends pretty good money, comes out of the class and fails. Now they've spent good money and they didn't pass. And they're not happy about it. I mean, I wouldn't be happy, but on the other hand, isn't that the right thing? If you go to college, you can spend a fortune at college, and if you don't do well, you still fail. And so it started to become credible. And in Genesis education, you asked me about my favorites. In the beginning, one of the things that I advocated is that in addition to all of the knowledge that we need to gain in order to design and build better projects, we also need to have an understanding of our clients and lifestyle. And so Genesis advocated a lifestyle program. So in addition to coming and learning about hydraulics and about lighting and so forth, the next thing on our agenda was understanding and appreciating dining and drinking and enjoying the good life which your clients are probably doing. And being able to relate to people on their level. And the joke that I've always advocated is if your idea of a good time involves a gun rack and a case of Budweiser, there's nothing wrong with that. But if your client's drinking 82 Bordeaux, you're not going to relate. you're not going to be on the same level. You're not going to be able to talk about stuff, and they're less likely to take you for your true value in your knowledge. And so we started doing lifestyle programs along with our normal education, and still do today. That's why at the International Pool Spa Show, we end up with a winemaker every year and do classes on tasting wine. And we've done cooking classes, and we've done trips to other countries that incorporated not only the water vessels, which there's some great historic opportunities there to see different water vessels, but also to understand the lifestyle locally and take cooking classes and things. So we tried to round out our education so that people could gain an area that they were somewhat lacking in.
I think you just answered a huge question across the board, is why the wine and cheese parties are at the show. So I mean, that's a good point to kind of understand your clientele and be able to relate with them. Never really heard that about it. So that's cool. That's the reason behind it.
And you touched on something let me give you another thing. So have either one of you guys attended any of the pool shows in other countries? Have you been to like Germany or Italy or Spain?
No.
Okay. So if you go to those shows, you'll see a couple of things that are totally different. And this is part of the education on an international level. We have people in other countries working with vessels with water that do similar things to what we do, but their take on it is different than ours. So like in Germany, they do a show in Cologne that is huge, by the way. It makes our show look tiny. That the show is based on wellness. As a matter of fact, the Pool Industry Association in Germany, BSW, has wellness in the name of the organization. They talk about wellness, not about swimming, but about wellness. And their programs are based on that. But when you go to their trade show, when we go to our show, you see what they call pipe and drapes, little booths that are marked off with frame pipes with curtains hanging on it. And that separates the thing. When you go to their show, they have built structures that sometimes look like a restaurant. And you go in and you sit down, and they always have food and wine and drinks. And you sit and you get to know the owner over a glass of wine, and he gets to know you, or she gets to know you, and you talk to them on a more personal level. And if you contrast that with our typical pool show, while you walk by the aisle, and if you don't want to stop at somebody's booth, you try not to make eye contact, and you go by because they got a handful of gum in a bowl, or they got a water wiggle you can take home to the kids, and you stop and you go, yeah, it's nice, I want a water wiggle, and you walk away. In those shows, the owner, like one of the people that makes a movable pool floor, Grando makes a movable pool floor, and Bert Granderoth is the owner. And one of the first times we were in Germany doing classes and stuff, we had the pleasure of meeting Bert and several of the other leaders of the German pool industry. And we went to the show and walked by the booth, and Bert said, no, you must come in and sit down. And we sat at a table, and they actually served dinner. Came with waiters and brought the food, and then the owner sits down with you, and you get to know people. And so in a smaller, dumbed down American version of that, Genesis wanted to do the more social aspect of shows, and that's why we have the Genesis Pavilion at the trade show, and we offer wine and cheese in our booth every day. And yes, granted, some people just come by and they don't even know what Genesis is and don't care, but they get free wine and they get a handful of cheese. And usually those are the people that drop the most crumbs on the floor. But
hopefully they don't think that you guys make wine and cheese.
Hey, I wouldn't throw it past them. I think there's probably some. I gotta get
this the next time I'm at Costco.
Yeah. I'm gonna look for that Genesis cheese.
Yeah, you guys need to get on that.
Yeah, that is a good thought.
That is really cool. I definitely think that other countries take, especially in the trades, I think they take their industry much more seriously when it comes to shows and different things like that. Every aspect of it, down to their processes, the way they treat their team, and just being at those shows. Because I've seen a lot of them online and on YouTube, and they definitely take it to a whole nother level. I just recently watched. They did it was motorcycle parts, but it was like companies like Ducati and stuff like this. And the show was in Italy, and it was like just a beautiful show, but it was like on the trades. I think people associate maybe here in the US, the trades with wearing your tank top and, your bleach shorts and flip flops to the show. And, you just pick up your bucket and all your supplies and your pens and all the knickknacks you were talking about. But, don't you want to feel classy and feel like you're a part
Elevate
of something
yourself.
That's fun, sexy, cool, and you're taking it serious? That way, when you wake up every morning, you feel like you're a part of something that's great.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And one of my first trips to Germany, I was with Bill Kent from Horner Express, and I was working the show with him, and just mostly just having fun. And we called on some pool people during the day. It was interesting because first of all, everybody that we called on, they were prepared for our arrival, meaning that when we got there, they weren't on the phone, they weren't on a meeting, they weren't late, they were there, and they were in a suit and tie, and they had food and beverages ready for us. Now think about how that would contrast with in the U.S. A sales guy makes an appointment with a pool guy, and he's on the phone, or he doesn't show up, or he forgot, or whatever. And there, they make a point. The whole family is there waiting for you. When you walk in, they're sitting there with their suit and tie. And then on another level, and more pointedly, one day we went to two places in the same day. The first place we went was a couple, a family, a husband, wife, and son that ran a pool store, which other than the signs in German, you would have mistaken for any pool store in the U.S. Had all the skimmer nets and leaf vacs and things it's on the wall. And they were ready for us, suit and ties, sandwiches and sodas, and beers and things in a bowl with ice, everything ready to go. And we had a nice conversation. But the essence of the conversation was their concern over losing sales on the internet. And that was a big part of it. They saw it as a huge problem, and that they were losing sales of their goods and so forth over the internet. And they admitted that business was slightly off. Okay, so that they were very nice about it and seemed very well educated and professional, and not wearing flip flops and chlorine speckled shorts, and so the same day in the same town, this was in Cologne, we went to a second pool design construction company. They had a standalone building with a big glass front. And when you walked in the front door, there was a receptionist, and they had there's a company called Riviera Pools and Spas. They make fiberglass vessels that are absolutely mind-blowing. They had those all around the showroom floor on the ground level. And then you went upstairs, and they had their design department where they had drafting tables and architects and people working on pool designs, and they were busy, and they were doing pools all over, and they never mentioned any problem with the internet, and they couldn't keep up with the amount of work. So I see a parallel, and that's all based on your thought. So if you think, and this is my short version, if you think your life sucks, you're probably right. If you think it doesn't, you at least have a chance. And so these people had a totally different view on the industry. They were within a few miles of each other. One is booming with a beautiful showroom, very professional. You would have been proud to say you worked with them and so forth. And the other one is a small mom and pop shop that looked like yesteryear, and they thought that their industry was dwindling because of the internet. And that's only a difference in perception, and it's the same here. And your point about wouldn't you want to elevate yourself, and wouldn't you want to think of yourself in a higher way? At their shows, people are in ties most of the time. And I'm now I live in a beach community, and I'm used to being casual, and it's interesting to me because I can hardly go to a restaurant that I can't go to in shorts, which is when it's hot out, that's the right thing, but it's not very formal. But I remember when I was a pool guy, I looked forward to the times when I could get dressed up, because most of the time I had speckled shorts on.
Yeah.
and in the time that I could, put on a suit and go to a banquet or go to some type of a socializing event, I felt like I had the opportunity to elevate myself somewhat, and I didn't smell like chlorine that day.
I think people are afraid of change, and I think it's real easy to get uncomfortable around. If you grew up, just kind of being a workhorse, and then you get into pools and you don't really know any better, the thought of, dressing up for an event or drinking wine and cheese is just like really weird, and you might just might hate on it a little bit. But, not have anything to do with pools, but I remember the first time I was like, you know what, I really want like a nice pair of boots. It was really weird because I always wore steel toe boots or I wore tennis shoes. This was a long time ago. I got my first motorcycle, and the boots I wanted were like $500. And people around me were like, dude, you don't seem like the kind of person that would wear $500 boots. I'm like, well, I want to feel and look nice. I think I'd wear them all the time. I got these boots. They were the Wolverine 1,000-mile boots. Every time I put those boots on, I was more confident, different. And I just felt like $1 million every time I put those boots on. I think if people would test the waters out more in certain things, especially like dressing up better, doing more things at the shows, I think if you gave some of those things a better chance, you'd really surprise yourself and your quality of living might go up quite a bit. And I'm just speaking from experience. There's a lot of things that, we're not confident in. That if you were to overcome some of those fears that, I think you would really surprise yourself.
Absolutely. I think you're dead on. Yeah. I think you're dead on.
So, just in your own words, what kind of impact do you feel, you and your partners have made in the industry through Genesis? I mean, we have, our thoughts, which is, you've made a huge impact, but we'd just like to hear from you.
Well, I appreciate that. I feel good about what we've done. I'm not sure that I realized what we were getting into when we got started. And I think that we were wearing our special boots and we're inspiring people to do likewise. So people saw that by the fact that we weren't afraid to charge for what we were doing. Bear in mind that when Skip and I first met, he was doing design for free so he could build the pool, which was the industry norm. And I had already started charging for my designs. And in the early days, I charged, I think my first job was $200. That was a residential. I don't even want to remember what year it was. But then the second job I did, it's the Raleigh Hotel on South Beach. You can look it up online. In fact, there's a video clip I don't know if it's still on our website or not, but I was on the TV show CBS Sunday Morning, and they had a video clip. Oh, it is? Okay. Yeah. I did the Raleigh Hotel. I got $500 for that. I thought I was a king. I mean, I thought, you're a special guy. And meantime, it's an iconic hotel. The design I did was a conceptual design and not for construction. It was something that the owner and I had talked about, and it broke all the rules, by the way, the design, and still does. But it's there, and it got away with it. And Sports Illustrated did a swimsuit edition there that put it on the map, and there were several TV commercials filmed there, and all of a sudden they decided to forget about going after him for breaking all the rules.
Ain't nobody looking at the pool and the
no, swimsuit. Not the swimsuit issue. No, not at all. When I did that, Skip and I were talking, and I said, well, you're doing design for free, and it looks like some of your designs are better than mine, and got him to charge for design. He still gives me credit for getting him charging for design. And then of course we both kept escalating our fees for design. So, and I used to start off some of my educational programs by saying I chose to do for a living what most of our industry does for free. That's how brilliant I am. And I made a good living doing pool design. Once I made that the focus, I made a good living in doing pool design. So I think that I'm pleased to see other people see the success that we've had by attempting to perform at a higher level, for charging correctly for what we do, and hope that inspires them. And it would inspire them to wear their best boots right away. And I fully agree with that. And I think you feel differently. And I feel differently even now. If I buy a new suit or something, when I wear it, I'm like, I look good. I feel right, and it's all of that. My daughter, who has her own business in California, in Venice Beach, in the television motion picture business, and is slightly different than me politically. She's on the left side of the country, and we've had discussions. We drink together, so sometimes the truth comes out with wine. That's one of the sayings about wine. But we've had discussions about that. But to get to the point, one day she went to pick me up at the airport for one of my visits, and she pulled up in a BMW convertible. And it was probably the most extravagant thing she's ever done for herself. And that was different than her norm. And we talked about it a little bit, and we had a good time riding around the car. And then she told me, she goes, I hate to admit it, but when I show up for a meeting with some of these producers and stuff, instead of showing up, she had a average car before. It probably had a dent in it and stuff. And now she shows up in this BMW convertible, and she said, I feel differently when I get there, and they seem to give me greater respect right from the get-go. And I said, I think it's absolutely true. We could debate whether that's right or not, because who knows? You could be the guy there in flip-flops that may be the best one in the room, but if you got your good boots on and you're dressed to the nines, that may get you greater respect from the get-go. And Vance Gillette always said you only get one chance to make a first impression. And so now she's making a different impression, and it has to do with her car, and then it could be your clothes, it could be the way you carry yourself, it could be with the confidence that you have for the knowledge that you've gained, because I think that you do gain confidence with knowledge. And knowing that you know about your product and you know about what you're doing to the nth degree, I think that people respect that, and all of a sudden they look up to you for your advice. I always tell people that the more that I charge for pool design, the more people paid attention to me. So when I did it for free, which I did at one point, I got tired of seeing other people building my designs and taking awards for a design that I came up with and being the builder on it. And the more I charged for the design, the more people would listen to every little word. They'd hang on every word. I learned to be confident enough to tell people that people would tell me at the end of my proposal when I was building, they'd look at my contract, they'd say, my wife and I really like you and your company, and you by far seem to be the best person that we've talked to, but, and there's always a but, everybody's got one. And they said, but you're $50,000 higher than Billy Bob's Pools. My answer to that is I would reach out and I would take the contract that I had given them, proposal in front of them, and I would take it back and I'd go, I must have made a mistake. And they'd start nodding like, yeah, that's what we thought, and I go, because usually I'm 75,000 higher than Billy Bob. I must have underbid something. I'd take it back and I'd tell them I'm going to take it home with me. And they'd go, no, we want to go with you. We're going to pay that. We just wanted you to know. Yeah. The thing is, that's confidence.
Yeah.
And I'd hope that the legacy that we leave is that the confidence of knowledge and ability supersedes everything else, and the desire to perform at the highest level and to do projects that not only look beautiful but work perfectly. That would be very important to us. And then the other thing is that Skip and I in later years would talk about it, but we wanted to see more of the younger part of our industry take over and go forward with the education and the processes that we've started. And right now, I am thrilled with the guys that have taken a leadership role. We've got a bunch of them you've had on your program that have taken the ball and are running with it to full blast ahead. And they're going to take the industry to the next level. And so if that's what I leave behind, if that's my legacy, I'm thrilled with that. In the meantime, I'm still active enough to have an impact, and not active enough to not have time to go out in my boat. So I'm enjoying this phase, and I still get people that contact us and tell us how being involved with Genesis has altered their life, both on a personal level and a business level. I think it's great. appreciate what you guys are doing too. I think it's a good thing to continue the educational thing and share other people's knowledge with the industry.
Well, we really appreciate that. And, we definitely feel that if it weren't for you guys in Genesis, the industry would be, completely different. And we think that, from here on out, things are just on the up and up. Seen a lot of changes. I mean, not just through Pool Chasers, but seen a lot of changes in the industry where people are holding other people accountable. And there's just a lot more of that going on. And that's good stuff, because this shouldn't be an industry that you want to get into because it looks easy and you don't need any kind of licensing and you don't need any education. You should look at the pool industry just like you would if you wanted to become an electrician or you wanted to do HVAC. Know that, okay, I'd probably need some kind of training. I'd need some type of schooling under my belt before I could, do that. Not just, oh yeah, I just go to Home Depot, pick up a few supplies and boom, I'm in business. It should be looked at completely different. And I think we are definitely on our way to that, being perceived as that to the outside world. So, with all that being said, what's next for Brian Van Bauer?
Probably going to lunch in my golf cart, which, by the way, I has to have seatbelts because it's street legal. Yeah. But what's next for me is that I've always had the idea that you should play as hard as you work, and I work pretty hard. So I always wanted to play hard, and I didn't always have the time to play hard. So now I have more time. I have dedicated time. I travel for Genesis. I'm active with my company on a limited basis, but I'm active with my company on projects. And then the rest of the time, I'm pretty much living the good life. Every day is Saturday.
Do you think pools will always be a part of your life?
Absolutely. And to that point, I get in my pool at my home almost every day. Yesterday, there was some lightning, so I didn't get in then. I'm a pool user, and I have a great outdoor entertainment area around the pool. I have a bar and TVs out there, and I look over the water and I sit out there on a regular basis. And I learned something from Skip years ago when he was being interviewed for an article. They were at his home in San Diego and in Escondido, and they looked at his pool and they said, "Skip, how often do you use your pool?" He goes, "Oh, I use it every day." And the reporter was taken aback and said, "You do? It's like 63 degrees today. How do you get in?" He goes, "Oh, I didn't say I got in it." He said, I come out here, we have breakfast outside. My kids have motorized boats they use in the pool. And he goes, "Before I had the pool, I didn't sit out here and I didn't look at the view I have because it just didn't entice me out. Now it does." So he uses his pool every day. And so I do that. I think pools will always be a part of my life. I still enjoy doing the educational programs. I did a cruise that Horner does every year, educational cruise. And I had a big turnout for people that were on somewhat of a vacation. When I can help share my knowledge with other people, my experiences and so forth, it gives me great pleasure. So I intend to continue to do that for as long as they'll have me.
You might have more of a vision, stepping away a little bit, because, a lot of designers and architects in history have actually had some of their best designs kind of retiring because they're actually able to take a second and take a step back and look at their surroundings, and they travel more and they're inspired by this rock face and, this countryside, and they're not there working. They're just naturally being motivated by the surrounding area. So who knows, with, you traveling, and maybe it's not so much business related, you might see something that inspires you to kind of go back to the drawing board for fun, and it ends up being some epic design. It's all around us. I recently heard a really cool, one of the most prolific designers lives in Tokyo, and they were like, "What keeps you motivated and what inspires you? Like, what does your day-to-day look like?" And he says, "I do the same exact thing every single day. I wake up at the same time. I take my dog for a walk on the same path in Tokyo. I do the same things every day." He's like, "Because there's little changes in my everyday routine, and that's like the same as like a home and a pool. It's the same routine, you wake up but what is in that is like changing, and that's what gets implemented into his designs." And I thought that was like kind of kind of cool, just kind of, because we all do somewhat the same thing in our, our business.
Somewhat.
And there's little changes here and there.
Little nuances that you pick up when you have a little more time.
Yeah.
When you start, and that's one of the problems. I've worked for a lot of high profile people that have busy lives because they're important and wealthy. And then and they have the toys, they have like I have a client that had a $4 million sailboat and took me out in the boat. But when we were sitting on the back of the boat, we were at a 20-foot teak table we're having rum and cokes, doing 20 knots with 12 knots of true wind, riding by some of the most idyllic islands in all of the British Virgin Islands, and eating food that his chef had prepared for us. He was sitting there with a BlackBerry doing this with the thumbs. And I turned to him and I said, someday when you're successful, you won't have to do that. And he looked at me and he started laughing, and he realized what I was trying to tell him. And a lot of people, when you ask them to do something pleasurable, that are people that are highly active, they tell you, I really I can't do that. And I go, yeah, right. Your problem is, as a self-employed person, your boss is a prick. And then they start laughing because it's all true. And they're self-energized. They're trying to keep things going. And your comment earlier about, sometimes you get a different perception as you get older. And the other thing is that they say that your work becomes more valuable after you die. So I'm hoping that some of the pools that I designed, the value will go way up, just kidding. Just kidding.
Before we wrap it up here, I'm just curious, and you've won over 100 design awards, and that's a huge accomplishment. So congratulations on that. But do you have a favorite pool or one you're most proud of?
Usually it's the one I'm working on at the moment. And, one of the things that you learn in the design business that's pointed, because if you look back at things that you did a long time ago, like if I used to save, I had a big valise that had all of my original drawings, some of the first drawings that I did for money for people. And when I look at them now, I'm embarrassed to show them to you. I pull them out and I go, holy God, you actually had the nerve to charge money for that. and then I compare it to, like, we just did a project in St. Croix that we did a program that had CAD 3D that showed people walking and getting into the pool and swimming around in the lazy river, and showed the fire going and all that. And I compare that. And so, you're constantly evolving and things change, and you look back and you go, wow, I came from that, but here's where I am now. And then you wonder, how much more don't I know? Right. And the answer is usually a bunch. So I still have the desire to learn more, and I'm willing to learn more. But I also may do what you suggested and have more time to pick up on the nuances as life continues forward. That's what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah, I'm going to send you a notepad so you can make note when you're on vacation. You just jot down some things.
I use my voice memo on my phone. I may not be able to find it later, but I do that.
Very cool.
That's a cool perspective on that. So where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Well, the easiest way is by email. Brian at aquaticconsultantsinc.com is easy. And that's the best way to do it. But if you go to the website, you can always do that, aquaticconsultantsinc.com, and that's the easiest way. And I one of the things that I always prided myself is I get back to everybody. Yeah, I if you call me or send me an email or something, I'll get back to you, even if it's to tell you that I'm not interested or whatever. I feel that that's an obligation to tell people, and it's what I want. It's one of my pet peeves, like with any trade of a landscaper that did work for me, and I needed something else done, and he kept telling me I'll be by, and he never came.
Yeah,
I'd much rather he tell me, listen, please go screw yourself, because I'm never going to show up. I'd be happier, and then I'd call someone else and move on. I don't mind that, sure. But I just like to know, and I think everybody does. So if you send me an email, I'll get back to you, and I'm pretty good about responding. So anytime I'm here, and I tell people if you have a couple of questions about a project and you want to email me, I'm happy to talk with you about it. If you have a whole list, that starts to become what I do for a living, and then there'll be some financial obligation after that. But I'm happy to help where I can and happy to give advice when I can.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for what you've done in the industry. You know, it's a true honor to have you on the podcast. So we appreciate you being down with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, guys, for your time and for what you're doing for helping to spread education and information. I'm in favor.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you giving us your time and your ear. If you're not following us on social media platforms yet, we are providing great content on there as well. So please check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Our tag is Pool Chasers. If you're interested in helping support the podcast and get access to great bonus content, as well as an opportunity to record a bonus episode or even a full episode with us, you can go to patreon.com/Pool Chasers. That's patreon.com/Pool Chasers. And did you know that you can also subscribe to the podcast so that you get updated every time a new episode is released? So if you're not subscribed yet, please do so. And if you like what you hear, please take the time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and all other major podcast platforms. Also, check out the Pool Chasers Facebook page. This is a place for like-minded pool professionals to ask questions, share knowledge, and come together as a community to help better the industry. Thank you all for the support. We truly appreciate it.
See you out there, Pool Chasers.